that time of week, that time of day, that time that I always look forward to, and it's Friday. Can't beat a Friday. Secondly, it's Masterclass Friday. So we're here doing masterclasses all day today, or most of the day today, starting on the East Coast, headed to the West Coast, and maybe back again. I think Kyle's on the East Coast. So we're doing my photography masterclass. For those of you who are new, welcome, welcome, welcome. I see someone joining all the way from Belgium. Welcome. Who was that? Roger from Belgium. Thank you for being here. And I see people already on my existing channels, such as Facebook and Twitter and my own Facebook channel. So thanks for being here, my own YouTube channel. Thanks for being here. And for those of you who are new, my name is Terry White. I'm the worldwide photography evangelist here at Adobe. And today we're going to be kicking things off, which is going to be kind of a take on something I did last week. As a matter of fact, let me get that. I just forgot. I did not even prepare this one quick little thing to show you guys. But last week, I'll talk about it while I'm getting it together here. Last week, I did a class on how do I do that in Lightroom. And it's actually, I got the idea from my friend Scott Kelby's book, How Do I Do That in Lightroom Classic. So I asked him, hey, Scott, you mind if I borrow your topic? And he said, of course, you can borrow my topic. And I said, hey, do you mind if I borrow the other one too? Like, how do I do this in Photoshop for today? He said, no problem. As a matter of fact, he was even gracious enough. Last week, we gave away the book, this is based on how do I do that in Lightroom. And today we'll be doing the same thing. Let me switch over to my computer real quick. We'll be doing it, we'll be giving away another book based on today's topic. How do I do that in Photoshop? So that's the cover of the book. I'm going to put a link in the chat for those that might want to buy the book if you don't win it. He covers way more in the book than I get a chance to in just an hour. So you get a chance to really dive into every little nitty-gritty topic that he covers in the book. I just scanned the table of contents and cherry-picked a few things in addition to the things I was already going to do. But by all means, check out the book. I put the Amazon link in the Behance chat. And speaking of the Behance chat, if you're watching this on other platforms, such as Facebook, such as YouTube, such as Twitter, that's great. You can hang out there and you can watch it wherever you want to watch. But if you want me to see a question or see a comment, then you do need to head over to the Behance chat. So b.net/Adobe Live. That's the chat that I'll be taking a look at today. So I see people like James, Mary Brown was able to jump in today. Nicholas and Paul Lee and General Kenobi and Rogu and Sean and Ferry and Delbur, Megan and Gary, and that's as far back as I looked. It scrolls, but anyway. So those are the people that are already in that chat, and I can see them, and they can see me, and I can see their comments. And if you want to comment, head over to b.net/Adobe Live. You can just sign in with your Adobe ID. It's free. You're free to create an Adobe ID, free to get in. You can then ask and comment, and if I don't see your question, I'm sure someone in the chat usually can answer it, but if I see your question, of course, I will take a moment to answer it as well. And Ralph just said, hey, Terry. Hey, Ralph. See, it works. We're live. All right, so with that said, without further ado, since I only have 50 minutes left, time flies, so let's go ahead and dive into the topic today. I'm going to delete one little layer really quickly. And let me pull up my outline of my things I want to cover today. And we did the bonus one. All right, let's, I'm actually close my images. I know you don't see it yet. I'm getting everything ready. Close the images, and now I can show you what I want to show you. All right, so switching over to my computer, you guys should now be able to see my screen. And now we're going to talk about, we're just going to go rapid fire into these, how do I do these things in Photoshop? So these are just random things. Again, I put together a list. I cherry picked a few out of Scott's table of contents in no particular order. There's a slight order, but no particular order, just how to do things. Are you using the latest version of Photoshop? Murray asks. Murray, I'm going to answer that question once and for all for everyone. I'm always using the latest version of Photoshop. I work for Adobe. Of course, I'm using the latest version of Photoshop that just came out with an update this week. So yes, always, always, always using the latest version. I may not be using the latest version of the operating system or my streaming software or whatever, but the tools that I'm showing usually, unless the update came out like 2 minutes before the stream, I'm usually doing the latest version. So always, you don't even have to ask. Yes, latest version. As a matter of fact, it says so right there. What's new? Because I'm in the latest version. So this update just came out this week, and I will show one of the new things in this update that is very important. But anyway, I'm going to close this because we're going to get into today's topic. Hey, Jan. So with that said, first tip, first, how do I do that? And I call this one dealing with the welcome screen. The welcome screen, most people have a love-hate relationship with it. I like it because it gives me quick access to images I just worked on and I can just quickly get to them. Some people hate it. The thing I didn't like about it, and I got to give Victoria Pavlov credit for this. She showed me a tip that I just did not even realize was a tip. Didn't realize it was there, is that, for example, if I wanted to get to I want to get to Photoshop and open something from my library, and it doesn't appear an easy way to do that unless you open something first. Like I just want to close the welcome screen. I want to open up an image, and then once I'm in Photoshop, I'll do whatever it is I want to do. So like I was always opening an image, like just opening the last image, closing it, and then being right in Photoshop. You don't have to do that. So you notice that there's a Photoshop icon in the upper left-hand corner. If you just click it, that gets rid of the welcome screen and puts you right into Photoshop. So no, you don't have to open a document first. You don't have to create a new document. You don't have to do anything in that welcome screen. You can just dismiss it. So I know people can go into their preferences and you can disable the welcome screen and you'll never see it again. But I like it when I need it, and I don't want it there when I don't want it there. Like right now, I just want Photoshop open. I don't want the welcome screen. I don't want to have to open up an image first. And that's the quick way to do it. Now, let's say, for whatever reason, I wanted to get back to the welcome screen without having to quit Photoshop and relaunch it. Well, now instead of it being a Photoshop icon in the upper left-hand corner, you notice there's a little home icon in the upper left-hand corner. So now if I click the little home icon, it takes me right back to the welcome screen. So basically those two icons toggle the welcome screen on for when you want it, when you need it, when you care, and toggles it off when you just want to quickly dismiss it and get out of it. And so that is my first tip. All right, second, let's go ahead and open up a couple of images. Now, I will say there's one thing that changed in the recent updates in Photoshop, well, dealing with libraries. I'm not sure it's a Photoshop specific thing now that I think about it. But one thing, I use libraries all the time. It makes it easy to organize images and have libraries for specific classes, specific things I'm working on. Like today I put some images in here that I wanted to work on. But one thing they changed that actually kind of bugs me. You used to double click on an image from the library and it would open. Now, if I double click on an image, it takes me to more information about that image. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I don't want to see more information. I don't want to add a description. I don't want to change the name. I don't want to see what type it is. I just want to open it. Now, if you click the edit icon, that will do it. But now you've taken my one step, which was double click, into 2 steps. Now, this is not something I had on my outline, but just to show you, because I do want to open up 2 images, that is the tip. Just to show you that if you want to bypass that second screen, so to speak, like I don't want to get to a screen just to click edit, right click and say edit. So that will just open it. Oh, I did the wrong one. Make sure you're on the right one you wanted to open first. All right, right click and edit, and then that will take you into the one you wanted to open. And I think I'm still on the wrong one. Hang on. I don't want the light bulbs. I want, are these the same? Yeah, no, they're not the same. Okay, let's try this one more time. Edit. Why am I not getting the other image? Oh. For some reason that one is like broken. Okay, well, forget it. I don't need that one. I just need a second image. So I will go ahead and open up the light bulb, or at least this one. I'm not sure why that other one won't open. But anyway, just right click, edit, and then boom, you're in. All right, so I still wish it was double click like it used to be, because it drives me crazy whenever I forget and I double click and it takes me to the second screen. But anyway, work around, right click, edit, and you're in. Okay, so now the tip that I was really trying to get to was, what if you have two images open at the same time and you want to see them side by side? Well, you know you can probably tear off the panel, or the window, I should say, and then you can if you got enough space and you work it around, you can probably get it side by side. That's not the best way to do it, as you can probably imagine. So let's see if I can get this back. There we go. Putting it back. The best way to do this is to actually let Photoshop arrange the windows for you. So if you go to Window, there's an Arrange, and this will let you see whatever you're looking at. Tile all vertically, tile all horizontally, 2 up horizontal, 2 up vertical. And the reason it specifies 2 up is that even if you had 3 images open, 4 images open, 5 images open, you can still see 2 of them at a time. So 2 up vertically, that's kind of not side by side. Let's try that a different way. Arrange and 2 up horizontal. Oh, I did horizontal. We want vertical. Sorry. I always get those two confused because it sounds like I want the other one. All right, so now I got them 2 up side by side, and that's great. I can click on one window, work on that image, click on this image, work on that image. I can see them side by side. We used to do this all the time because usually you were copying stuff from one side to the other, and it just made it easier to see them side by side. But just to let you know, you don't have to see them side by side to drag from one to the other. So here's another bonus tip, because usually that's why people wanted them side by side. So I can say, oh, drag this image, this light bulb, onto the portrait shot. Let's put it back. So I'm going to go to Window. I'm going to consolidate all tabs and just consolidate all to tabs to put it back to tabs. Now let's go back to the light bulb. Let's say I want that light bulb image in the other one. So we're jumping ahead. We're going to do a quick thing with layers, but while I got these two images open and I'm talking about this thing, I'll add this in and then we'll go back to the outline. So I want the light bulb image on this image. So I could copy and paste the layer, but if you want to do a drag and drop, you can just start dragging this image, even though it's not a layer, even though it's just a background. I can drag it up until I touch my mouse on the tab of the other image. So just on the tab, there it is. Don't let go. Because what happens when you let go? Nothing. So I've let go, and it was a waste of time because you didn't finish the step. You didn't finish the drag. So go back, drag it up to the tab. Your other window comes up, open. Don't let go until you drag it into the window anywhere. Anywhere in this window, then you can let go, and it says, oh, you're trying to drag a copy of that other image onto this one. So you didn't move it, you didn't change it, you didn't change the light bulb image in any way. You took a copy of it and put it on your second window. And now people are usually a little puzzled because they see it either way bigger, way smaller. Rarely do they see it the exact same size. And in this case, it's way bigger. So why is this image way bigger than the image it covers? Because they're different resolutions. The light bulb is a higher resolution than my portrait shot, probably shot with a newer camera that shoots in a higher resolution. Or it was done as a art piece in Illustrator and it was done at a higher resolution. So in either way, how can I now scale this down to the size of my other window, or just smaller? Like, how can I make it smaller? So we're going to see a few tips here. First and foremost, if I want to scale any layer, the quickest way to do that is to go into free transform. So edit, free transform. I usually do it from the keyboard, so it always takes me a second to remember what menu it's under because I never do it from the menu. But Mac, Command T, PC, Control T. So once I do Command T, nothing happens. Well, actually something did happen, and this is another tip. It's got handles on the image now. You just can't see them because the image is so big, the handles are outside the viewing area of the window. And you're like, well, how come hey, Gus Martin, hey, Tim, How come I can't see the handles? What, did free transform not do anything? What did the Command T get me? You just don't see the handles because they're so far, the image is so big, they're so far out. So another bonus tip, instead of you zooming to make the window smaller so you can see the handles, just on your keyboard, Mac, Command key, PC, Control key, 0. So Command 0, that will always take how big the handles are, no matter what size they are, and make them fit in the window. So if it was 3 times that size, it would still scale it down so I can see all the handles all the way around my free transform. So Command 0, quick tip for that. Now that we're here, I want to scale this down. And for decades, literally decades, you've held down the Shift key to scale it proportionally. Now that is not the case by default. You can go back and change it. You can also, you can turn off the constrained proportions here, maintain aspect ratio here, and it's sticky. 2 ways to do it, but I prefer not having to hold down the Shift key. So I actually like that change. So I can scale it down. And notice it's scaling it from the side that I did it on. If you want to scale it from the center, just hold down your Option key, and that will scale it from the center proportionally, so it's not stretching it, and it's making it the size that I want it to be. So I can move that around. I can say, no, I want it a little bigger. I can keep doing stuff until I say commit to this change. I can move it, I can scale it, I can even distort it. If I do hold down the Shift key, that will distort it, but I don't want to distort it. So I'm just gonna not hold down the Shift key and put it where I want it. Okay, so now that I got it where I want it, how do I tell Photoshop I'm done scaling? You can either hit the Enter key, if you have an Enter key on your keyboard. If you have a small keyboard, you may not have an Enter key. You can hit the check mark up here in the control panel, but also fairly new in Photoshop is that you can just click away from it. So if I just get out of it and just click, that now commits to it, whereas before it didn't. You could be clicking all day long and nothing would happen until you click the check mark or hit Enter. All right, so now I can hit Command 0 again, and it zooms the biggest part of the image to fit the window, and I've got the little part. All right, so now we got this layer, and we're going to get into a few tips on layers in just a minute. But while we're talking about zooming, let me get back to my outline, and let me talk about how to quickly get around your image. You've already seen one tip. Command 0 will always make it fit in the window. So if it's handles that are too big, they fit in the window. If it's the image itself, it will fit in the window. So so Mary says you don't have to change it to a smart object. Mary, you don't have to do anything. You can change it to a smart object, and if you do, that will maintain the resolution, but you don't have to. It's a choice. So it's totally up to you. That is a perfect choice. If you think you're ever going to scale it back up, then yes, I would absolutely create a smart object to be able to scale it back up without losing quality. But if I know I'm just going to make it smaller, I'm done. I don't need a smart object for that. All right, so next up, zooming. So we zoomed out or in based on the size of the image or the handles. What if I want to zoom in more? Well, there's a zoom key, right? There's the magnifier. Hit the letter Z on your keyboard, or Z, to get to the zoom key. And the way the zoom key used to work is you would drag a rectangle around whatever it is you wanted to zoom in on. That's not been the case for probably a few years now, because the zoom is interactive. So if I just start dragging it, it zooms in quickly because of the optimizations we did around your graphics card. So I can quickly zoom in and get where I want to get. So I can zoom in on the eyes, make sure the eyes are in focus. Now I'm going to give you a tip for, and of course you can go the other way and zoom out. So I'm dragging down to zoom in, dragging up diagonally to zoom out. You can go to a different spot of the image and zoom in and zoom out. You can, like, I want to zoom in on that area, I can zoom in on that area. So wherever I put the magnifying glass, that's where it zooms in. Now, what if I want to, like, I'm retouching, so I'm going in and I'm grabbing my spot healing brush, I'm making my brush a lot smaller with my left bracket key, and I'm like removing some stray hairs. Okay, great. Now I need to see if there's another spot that I need to work on. Well, I could zoom out, and then zoom back in. Yes, thank you. I don't need to learn more. I got it. Okay. I, it's super helpful. It wants to keep helping me. All right. I can zoom out and zoom back in again, but I want to maybe keep my zoom level, but just move around. Well, you can hold down your space bar and you can move around this way. So the space bar changes whatever tool I'm in to a hand tool to be able to pan around. But if I'm back on the zoom key, so remember now I'm on the zoom, and of course we know dragging up and down will zoom in, zoom out. If you hold down the letter H, this is a very hidden tip. That's why it's H, and click. It zooms all the way out, but it gives you this rectangle that represents how much you were zoomed in. Then I can move the rectangle to an area that I want to look at next and just let go. So H, hold down H, click, zoom in on the necklace, let go. Hold down H, click, zoom in on the eyes, let go. Hold down H, click, zoom in on the hair, let go. I can quickly keep my level of zoom, but get anywhere around the image I want to see what it is I want to see and work on. So if I now want to work on the mouth, great, I'm there. If I want to work on the necklace or see if it's in focus, it's not, I'm there. If I want to go back to the light bulb, boom, I'm there. And that just lets me quickly pan around and get around without having to zoom out, zoom in, so forth and so on. All right, next up. So we now can quickly get around the image. Great. Why H? I don't know, because probably some other letter was already taken for something else. That's why it's always not the letter you would think it is. So because Z would make sense, but that takes you to the zoom tool. So it's always because something was taken. All right, so let's quickly get out. And now let's go in. And one of the things I showed in Lightroom that was very popular, people kind of dug it. So let's go ahead and show the same thing in Photoshop. So for example, we notice we see the tools, we see the panels on the right-hand side, so forth and so on. So for example, if I want to quickly hide that stuff, that's always been the tab key. So the tab key will quickly hide those panels. They're still there, but they're hidden. Hit the tab key again, and that will let me bring them back. So that and that. Okay, so next up, let's say that I want to just, hey, come look at this image. But I don't want the person that I'm asking to come look at this image to see all the Photoshop stuff around it. So you can hit the letter F, which will take you kind of full screen. Hit the letter F again to take you full screen. So F, F, and F again will toggle me back to the beginning. So F, back to the beginning, F, kind of zoomed in, F, full screen. And by the way, that kind of zoomed in really just gets rid of the control panel at the top. And then F again to quickly say, hey, come look at this image. And that way they're not really seeing all the interface and asking, what's that do? What's this do? They're quickly just seeing what you're working on. All right, so now that we got that, now let's go back to the other image I wanted to show you that I closed, this one. And let's right click on it and edit it, because I can't double click anymore. All right, so now that I'm here, let's talk about making selections, because this is, again, how do I do this in Photoshop? Now, I see someone saying, hey, let's step it up, make it more advanced, this is blah, blah, blah. That's not what this class is about. I did not title it Advanced Photoshop for a reason. This is for photographers that don't use Photoshop on a regular basis. And they're like, how do I do some of those things I do in Lightroom in Photoshop? So if this is not the level of class you're looking for, head out. Don't waste your time if you already know all this. All right, so next up, let's go ahead and make a selection. So selections is like probably the biggest part of Photoshop, because if you know how to make selections, then you can do more work. You can do more things in Photoshop. And every version of Photoshop keeps adding new ways to make selections. So what's a new way to make a selection now? Well, let's say I just want to select the apple on the left. Well, there's the new object selection tool. And if I click the object selection tool, I get a choice. I can use it as a rectangle or I can use it as a lasso. It works the same. The only reason you'd probably change it is that you're trying to select something intricate and you need to kind of work your way around it with the lasso. So let's go ahead and grab the rectangle. And so even if let's say I miss parts of it. Let's say I do that. Photoshop still figured out that I wanted the apple because the object selection tool, just like select subject and other tools we have, are really designed with Adobe Sensei in mind. So rather than it saying, oh, you only selected the inside of the apple, that's all I'm going to do, it's saying, what was the person probably trying to do? Because if I just wanted a rectangle inside the apple, then I could use the rectangular marquee tool and select just the rectangle and not the outside. So if I want to do very specific work, that's what the other tools are for. But if I'm kind of saying, hey, Photoshop, help me out here, make a selection quickly for me, that's what the object selection tool is for. So now that it made that selection, what can I do with it? Well, you notice that you're just on the background. Like you just took a photo, you open it up, you're on the background. You made that selection with the object selection tool. And now what that basically did is isolate the apple from everything else in the background. So for example, if I were to grab a paintbrush, if I were to grab a brush and I were to grab some different color paint, let's say blue. And now I got some blue paint and I got my brush. Let's make my brush much bigger. All right, I hit the right bracket key to make it bigger. I'm just going to start painting this white background. What you're going to notice is nothing happens because I told it to only pay attention to the left apple. Not the background, not the other apple, not this apple. I'm painting, I'm holding down my mouse, nothing's happening because I made a selection. Now, if I come over here and paint, yep, it will paint only within that area. So you notice that I started outside the area, it waited until I got inside the selection, and even though I went outside the area, it only painted that area, which again is a nice feature for when you're trying to retouch a specific thing and you don't even want any spill. You don't even want anything outside the lines. Select it first, then you can do anything you want on that object, and you can say, okay, now that will only stay within the bounds of my selection. Now, notice I painted blue. And it didn't really maintain the midtones of the apple. It just gave me solid blue. And if that's what I wanted, then I'm fine. If I needed a solid blue stripe on the apple, I'm great. But if I undo, there's more than one way to do things. So for example, the paintbrush paints a solid color of whatever it is. Hang on. Paints a solid color of whatever it is. I need to turn these off. Paints a solid color of whatever it is you're working on. But if you hold it down, there are other brushes. So there's even a color replacement tool that will probably do more of what you thought would happen. So if I grab that tool, that brush, and I paint, it's giving me the color inside the apple. Oh, it's because my selection limits are discontiguous. There we go. No, I do want contiguous. Never mind. There we go. And it's actually changing the color. It's not just painting a solid stripe of blue. So I could just go over the whole thing and paint the whole thing. And again, that could be done. But there is a quicker way if you wanted to fill the whole thing in with just the color, you could. So let's undo, 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 undo. Undo all those strokes. And let's say I did want to just fill that with the blue color. So edit, fill, not content aware. I want to use the foreground color. But I want to use a blend mode called color. Because if I use normal, what's that going to do? Solid blue. So we don't want solid blue. So edit, fill. I'm getting way off topic here, but these are quick little tips. And instead, we want to fill this with color. That's the same thing as the color replacement tool. It says, okay, now I'm going to fill just the midtones with the color, leaving the highlights and shadows the same. All right, so now let's undo that. And let's talk about why you shouldn't do it that way. Because that was permanent. If I didn't undo and I forgot and I went on and I saved it or whatever, then I got a permanent blue apple that I would have to figure out how to get back to red. So what we tend to do is we tend to duplicate things onto their own layers. That way, is the color replacement brush new? Yeah, it came out like in 1998. It's that new. So anyway, the way we protect ourselves is by not doing destructive work. So if you wanted a permanent blue apple and you're fine with that, by all means, head out. But now that I've got that apple selected, I can duplicate it onto its own layer. And the keyboard shortcut, Command J, that's the one I would do all the time. But if we go to Layer, New Layer via a copy, that's Command J, PC, Control J. And what that did is now it's not selected anymore because it put the apple on its own layer. So it gave me a backup copy. I still have the original underneath. You don't see any difference because it's directly on top of the original, but I still have the original underneath, and I have this new one, the one we're looking at now, on its own layer. So now I could go in and I could paint that one, and it wouldn't destroy my original. But that wasn't shade. That was just a joke that's been there a while. So, hey, don't try to start fights, man. You're a moderator. You're supposed to be on our side. Anyway, let's go in, and let's say, what else can we do? Now, we learned Command T, free transform, and we know that we can now pick that up and move it around. Oh, hang on. Yeah, we don't have to be in free transform, but once we're in free transform, we can pick it up, we can move it around because that's a copy. We can scale it. We can put another copy of it over here. And here's another quick tip. Let's say I don't want it to look exactly like my original. Well, I could right click on it and I can flip it, for example. I could flip it over horizontally, so now at least it's facing the other way. Now keep in mind when you start doing stuff like that, you have to worry about, does the lighting look right? Because this was more of a shadow on this side and more light on this side, so the light's coming from this direction. So now you just change it to where now the light's coming from both directions. And again, you just got to be conscious of stuff like that. The other thing you'd have to worry about is that these are sitting on a table, so they have a shadow. When I made that original selection, it does not have a shadow. So you'd have to be in consideration of that. So now let's keep that layer the way it is for a second. And let's say I wanted to put it behind this apple. Well, there is no behind because that's a flat layer of 3 apples. But I could fix that. I can go back to the background. I can go back to my object selection tool. I can, again, even though this apple's here, it's not paying attention to it because I'm not on that layer. But I can say, hey, select that apple. And even though I didn't do it perfectly, it knows what to do. Now, just because I have that apple selected, just because we've already learned that we can make a copy of that selected object onto its own layer with Command J or PC Control J. Now we've got the new apple. We got the old one right underneath it. And now if we think about layering, remember this apple that we originally worked on? Well, it's still on top because if you look at the layers, that apple's on top of that apple, and that's on top of the background. But what if I simply change the order by dragging the layers around? Now, that apple's behind it. I don't need a shadow anymore because it's behind it. You can't see the bottom anyway. And I still have the ability to free transform that apple, and maybe I want to make it a little bigger, and it's behind the other one, so it works out great. So for my photographers out there that ever questioned, like, I use Lightroom, it does everything I need. Why would I ever need Photoshop? Because you can't do this kind of stuff in Lightroom. When you start talking about layering and compositing and moving things around and more easily removing distractions for images, this is the kind of stuff Photoshop was built for that Lightroom just isn't designed to do because it's designed to make tonal changes, and whether it's global or selective. But that's about it. So it just depends on what you're trying to do. All right, now let's go in. I guess I'll stick with the tools I used in used to 1998. I think the computer in 1998 had 4 megabytes of RAM. That's about right. All right, so now let's keep going. So let's talk about we did that. So we covered a lot of ground. Now, what if I don't want to duplicate a layer? What if I just want a new layer? And by the way, one of the things you notice, my layers are really tiny. You can change that. You don't have to work with something you can barely see. If you go to your panel options, another bonus tip, you don't have to work with the smallest thumbnail size. You can work with a medium. You can work with a large. So I'll make it large so it's just easier for you guys to see it. Now you can see it much better. All right, so now I changed my thumbnails to be larger, and now we're going to talk about, well, what about a layer that doesn't have anything on it? Well, you can just simply create as many new empty layers as you want. So down here, there's a plus sign, usually the plus sign at the bottom right of any panel is new. So new empty layer, and that's layer number 5 or 3. I'm going to make it empty. It's not going to stay empty. But now that empty layer is there, and think of a layer as like a clear piece of acetate. So if I were to grab a brush, and let's not use the color replacement brush, let's use the regular brush tool, and let's go into, nope, I didn't want that. I want it. There we go. Got my brush, and now I want to bring up my brushes panel. And you have hundreds. You could have up to thousands of different brushes. So I'm just going to grab like just a more decorative kind of brush. And I'm just going to go ahead and make that brush bigger. And now again, it's still in the blue color. And if I'm on my empty layer and I just paint, I'm going to get those speckles or spatters of color. And that's great. That's cool. I can now like play with that. And it's on its own layer, so it's not touching my other apples at all. So I need, see, Olivia is all about the little things. Olivia's like, oh my God, thank you. I need to change the size of my layers. So now we know we can change the stacking order. So I can bring it down below that apple. Great. I can bring it down below that apple. Great. But I can't bring it down any lower because the background by default is always on the bottom. So am I stuck? Not really. Because, well, I could do one thing. I could duplicate the layer. There we go. I could duplicate each object onto its own layer. I could play around that way. Or I can simply turn the background into a layer. So most of Photoshop is not how to do something. It's how to do something in a way that makes sense for you. Because I just gave you 3 ways. I'm about to give you a 4th way of how I could maybe get those blue speckles behind the other apples. Because it really depends on what makes sense for you or what's easier for you to remember or what's easier for you to do. Because some operations you can do in 2 clicks. Some operations could take 50 clicks. And you can still end up with the same result. So that's really Photoshop in the nutshell. So in this case, I want to turn the background into a layer so I can move it up. But you're going to see a problem when I do that. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's turn the background into a layer. And to do that, all I have to do is unlock it. Now, there used to be all kinds of ways to get it unlocked. Now we just made it easy. Just click the lock. Now it's unlocked, and now it's layer 0. So now it's layer 0, and guess what? Now because it's a layer, it can move up above the blue splatters. But it has a white background. And now because it has a white background, we don't see the blue splatters. So how can I get rid of the white background? Well, one way I can do it is select all the objects on it. I can even select them all at the same time. And then delete the background or mask the background or duplicate the objects onto their own layer so there is no white background. Several ways to do it. Again, whichever way is easier or makes sense for you. But I want to introduce you to one more concept in the layers panel that might make it easier for you called blend modes. So each layer, not the background, but each layer has the ability to blend certain ways on the layer below it. So if I go to my blend modes, you see we're on normal, and I could go to dissolve. I can go to darken. And the minute I start playing with the blend modes, I can start to see what they're like, what they're going to do based on my object. Now, many of these you'll look at and you'll say, why would I ever use that? But a lot of these you'll use all the time. So it just depends on what you're looking for. So for example, I might choose multiply or dark. Actually, no, I don't want those. I might choose. Actually, I don't want any. Actually, luminosity is kind of cool. But I want any one of those for now. But you could try blend mode, and that blend mode could maybe let you see what's behind the other one. But again, that's not really going to work for what I wanted to do. So what I could do is I could simply say, I'm going to try it a couple of different ways, see which way I like best. I can say select subject, and I'm on the 3 apples, and voila, it selected all 3 apples for me. Great. Now that I've done that, I can just simply hit the mask button down here at the bottom of the layers panel to mask out that background. So I just made a selection, hit mask, it created a layer mask, which is non-destructive, and now the background's been masked out. But wait, why do we see this checkerboard pattern? Whenever you see checkerboards in the layers panel, that means that it's transparent. So you can put something else on top or behind it and it would show through. So what if I wanted it back to being white, but I just want these speckles behind the apples? No problem. Create a new layer, put that layer at the bottom, and fill it with white. Now we've accomplished our goal. We went a roundabout way to do it, but again, that's what Photoshop is learning the most straight path to getting what you want. And again, you can do it 20 steps, you can do it in 2. It just depends on what it is you're trying to do and the fastest way for you to do it. So now I've achieved my goal. I've got my paint specks on their own layer behind everything else, so kind of creating my own background. I've got the apples still intact, still white background if I need it because they're masked. I've got a new apple that I just added behind it, and I've got that other apple, which is, that was originally a test. I really probably don't even, oh yeah, that was to put behind the other one, yep. I was gonna say, I maybe not even need that one anymore, but I still do. Okay, so that was a quick, just rapid fire layers kind of thing, just so you know. All right, let's move on. We got some time left. Good, let's keep going. We did that, we did that. Oh, so let's talk about adding the shadow. Because you notice that my shadows are kind of gone now because when I made that select subject, it didn't select shadows. It usually doesn't. Depends on if the shadows are very subtle, especially. So how can I get shadows back in for those apples? Well, let's first of all turn off this paint speckles for a minute just to make it easier to see what we're dealing with. Now, I want the shadows obviously underneath the apples. And there is a way to do it on the apple layer, but it would be permanent. There's even, you could paint the shadows in, you could paint behind, there's a technique for that. But I want to be able to just draw shadows without permanently changing my apple layer. So we go back to create a new layer again. New layer, put that layer behind the apples layer, and we're going to start naming our layers. Double click, we're going to name that one shadows. All right, and we're going to name this one, now it's empty anymore, it's paint specks. All right, so now, and you know, you can keep going, but you start to, when you start getting more than a few layers, you might start forgetting what they're for. That's why I recommend naming them. All right, so now we go to the shadows layer. We grab a paintbrush, not the speckles this time. We go to our brushes panel and we grab something that's just round and soft. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to scroll that. Let's just use a very soft round brush. All right, so now we got a nice soft round brush, and shadows are usually dark, so we'll switch to black and white. And we're gonna make our brush much smaller. And now, this is what happens. If I start painting, I get a very, very distinct shadow. And that's probably a little too much shadow for this scenario. The shadows were very subtle and very light. So I can do it 2 ways. I can either A, change the opacity of my paint so my paint's just lighter. Or B, change the opacity of the layer so what I paint on it becomes lighter. Just like that. So, again, your choice. What works best for you? I like changing the opacity of the layer because then they're all going to be consistent. They'll all be the same. So, for example, even though I'm painting right on the apple, I'm on a layer below the apple. So, therefore, the paint kind of just goes right underneath it. Like that. And like that. And because that layer is all one layer with the shadows on it, they are all the same opacity. So if I need to bring them down even more to make them less subtle, more subtle, less opaque, just lower the opacity. And now I've got my 3 shadows, and you can tweak those to your heart's content to get them just the way you want. Okay, now we got that, and let's move on. We did that, we did that. Let's get out of this. I'm going to close the apples. I'm not going to save them. I'm going to close my composite. I'm not going to save it. I'm going to close that. I'm not going to save it. And I keep going and keep working. All right, let's get to our next subject. All right, actually, this is going to let me do two things at once. I'm going to go to Lightroom, because again, that's where a lot of photographers will be with their images. And I'm going to go to a collection. Hopefully I have this collection. There it is, remove distractions. All right, so on this collection, I've got just a bunch of stuff that creates distractions. Like, for example, little poles sticking up in the water, and there was all kinds of distractions on this original image, and soft boxes sneaking into the scene, so forth and so on. But this was a fun one. I'm actually going to delete this one, get it out of here. This was one where I wanted to get rid of the license plate, but I wanted to look natural. I hate when people post an image and they use just black paint because they want to cover something up that was sensitive information, or they use white paint or red, or just they paint over it. And it just looks tacky when you do that. Now, if it's just a social media post and you're not a photographer, okay, go for it. But if you're a photographer and you're trying to say, hey, I don't want that license plate to be shown, well, I could grab the white paint over the number, so then it's just a white license plate. But then that doesn't look real either, because it would, if it was a license plate, it would have something on it. So what we want to do is get rid of the license plate, but maintain the look of the car. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to now do a couple things. I have a photo in Lightroom. I want to edit that photo in Photoshop because Lightroom can't do what I'm about to do. So how do I do that? Well, you can right click on it. You can choose Edit in Photoshop, and that will take it over to Photoshop. And the keyboard shortcut on Lightroom Classic is Command E. On Lightroom, the other version, is Command Shift E. So Lightroom Classic, Command E, and that will take a copy, because it was a raw file, over to Lightroom. So I don't have to duplicate the layer and all that. I already have a backup to go to. So now, what do I want to do? Well, I would love to, first of all, get the shape of this license plate well. So you notice how it's indented into the car and there's a shadow around it. I want to get that same look and feel, but with no license plate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my quick selection, another selection method, quick select, and I'm just going to select this area. So I'm on the background, which is where I start. I'm just going to select this whole area, not just the license plate, but that whole well. Now I'm going to create a new layer. We just learned how to do that. So a new empty layer, and I'm going to paint that layer. I'm going to fill in that selection on a new layer with the same color as the wheel well. Now, I've showed you how to get colors. That's great. But what if you want to match a color that's already in your image? Eyedropper. So whenever you're in an Adobe program, the eyedropper is for picking up colors. So I hit the letter I to get me to the eyedropper. Not E, I. Okay, so, and I click the eyedropper right on that color, not the shadow, not these shadow areas. I want to get that bright color. Boom. Now that becomes my foreground color over here on my left-hand side. So now I got that color selected as my foreground color. Great. And now that I've got it as my foreground color, I want to fill that selected area on this new layer with that color. So edit, fill. There's keyboard shortcuts for this too. Foreground color, normal mode, not color mode. And I know that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, but there it is. And now I can deselect. And by the way, the other thing that frustrates people to no end is they don't know how to deselect things. Because in most programs, like a word processor or any other object-based program, you just click away from the thing you've got selected to deselect it. That doesn't work that way in Photoshop, unless you're on another selection tool. Like if I'm on the eyedropper, I'm just going to keep picking up colors. If I'm on any other tool, it's going to start doing what that tool does. So how do I say I'm finished selecting this? How do I get out of this? Well, there's a keyboard shortcut, but I'm going to show you where it is. Deselect. So there's a command for deselecting. And by the way, if you're ever in Photoshop and you're painting and nothing's happening, 9 times out of 10, it's because you've got something else selected. Remember how it protected the apple when I changed it, when I'm painting over it? It wouldn't let me paint anything else because the apple was selected. So if you forget to deselect and you're now working on a totally different part of the image and it's not letting you do what you're trying to do, first thing you do is hit Command D on Mac, PC Control D, deselect, then try painting again. And I bet it's because, hey, Philip Lewis, I bet it's because you had something selected. So now we've got just this solid color on top of the frame, and we could try and get away with that. It's certainly better than black paint. It's certainly better than white paint or red paint over the numbers, but we want to kind of make it look like it did. We want to kind of make that indent of that shadow area around it. So each layer also has the ability to have effects. So it's this FX icon in the lower right-hand corner. I'm getting all kinds of stuff down. Oh, I can't go down there without bringing up my dock. There we go, that FX icon right there. That will let you do all kinds of little effects on your image. So for example, one of the effects I want to do is called inner shadow. That's exactly what I want. I want an inner shadow, and it's like magic. Yeah, how'd you know? That's exactly what I wanted to do. I don't even have to adjust anything. I could adjust the angle or the opacity of it, make it darker, make it lighter. I can make the distance, make it, kind of move it to one angle or another, but it came up so perfectly. I just click OK, done. That was it. Now I have my beautiful car with no license plate that doesn't look like I painted over it just to hide the numbers, and it's just a quick way to just make it look better. All right, now back to the Lightroom, the Photoshop thing. So we did our thing. We made the car look better with the license plate. Great. How do I now get this back to Lightroom? We save it, and that will automatically save it, depending on your settings in Lightroom, as a layered TIFF by default. I changed mine to be a layered Photoshop in the Photoshop preferences. And now we'll go ahead and just close it. And that will put it right next to the original. So here's the original. That's why I didn't have to duplicate anything. There's the original, and there's the one that I just made. And so it's not identical, but it's certainly good enough that if you didn't see it by side, you think, oh, wow, it looks great. Okay, next up. We're running low on time, so what can I do in a couple minutes? So we removed distracting thing, one quick thing. Let's talk about sharpening really quick. No, we're not going to talk about sharpening really quick. We're going to do something else really quick. Let's open up this one. All right, so now we got this stock image, guy sitting on an island, kind of cool. That's actually a cool stock image. Anyway, and they did it right, shadows of the tree and the guy, did all that. So let's say we wanted to now add some text to maybe put our own little meme together, our own little thing together, because again, that's something you don't do in Lightroom, or you don't do that typically as a photographer. So we grab our text tool, the letter T. I just hit the letter T. That way I don't have to look for it, because your tool panel may be in a different order than mine. And now when I click, it's going to do two things. It's going to, A, put in some sample text, but B, it's going to make a new layer. So you don't have to worry about ever text damaging or being stuck on your original layer like it used to back in the early days. You can type your text, and the isolation will end soon. All right, so now I've typed my text in. Why is it gray? Why is it that font? Why is it that small? Why is it that whatever? Because it remembered the last thing I did. So whenever I use the type tool, the last time I used the type tool, it was this color, this size, this font. But you can, of course, change it to whatever you want. So you have your font choices. I'm on Adobe Clean, which is our corporate font. You don't have access to that unless you work for Adobe. Let me choose a different one. And now you notice as I hover over it, it will show me the different fonts that I have installed, or I've got synced from Creative Cloud. So say I like that one. And then I can go in and say, well, that color doesn't make sense. I can pick a new color, great, and make it blue. What if I'm not good at picking colors? Then you notice if you move outside the color box, you get the eyedropper and you can sample a color that's already in the image. So great, that looks better, but it's a little too small, so no problem. I click OK. And I now make the text bigger. I could type in a point size. Right now it's 29. Let's make it 60, make it twice as big. Oh, I don't know how big I need it to be because I'm not good at guessing point size. I never have been. So you notice a quick tip here. You notice you can type the number in, you can pull down from a menu, but if you hover over the TT, you get a little finger pointing left and right. That little finger pointing left and right is what we call a scrubby slider. So I can scrub it bigger. I can scrub it smaller. I can make it as big as I need it to be. And now I got it the size I want. Great. I now Click commit, great. I can grab the move tool, I can move it around because it's on its own layer. And now I still need to be able to see it, but I don't want to make the text a little any darker. I go to my effects and I come down to drop shadow. Drop shadow at the very bottom. And I'm going to make that much smaller. There we go. And you can even, another tip, instead of moving it around with all of this stuff, you can pick up the shadow and just move it. You can put the shadow wherever you want it to be. So I'm just grabbing it as an object and moving it around so it'd be easier to see. And that is my time today. I'm going to do a part 2 of this because we only got through like a third of the things I wanted to show today. So part 2 will come up, and I just want to thank you guys for being here. I'm out of time and I don't want to get cut off because next up is the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. Thanks everybody for all the input, and we will keep doing these. There's a part 2 to Lightroom next week. Cheers everybody, and we will give away the book. I'm just going to quickly scroll through and grab a name. And I stopped on Christine Jones. So Christine Jones, you won the book for the day. Bye everybody.